Hi everyone, welcome to episode 51 of the Startup Playbook podcast. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they used to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. There were several reasons why I started this podcast 10 months ago, one of the biggest reasons being that I could personally learn so much from the guests I have on the show, and by recording and uploading these conversations, I could pass on those learnings to the larger startup community. As you're probably aware, we celebrated the 50th episode of the podcast last week, and to celebrate the milestone, I've gone back through each of the episodes and picked out my one key learning from each guest. I was going to share this in one blog, but after writing the first 10 or so, I had already hit 3,000 words. So realizing that you probably don't want to read a 15,000 word blog in one go, I've split up the post into a 5-part series called 50 Lessons from 50 Successful Founders, Investors, and Experts. Part 1 is available on my Medium account, which I'll link in the show notes for this episode at startupplaybook.co, with the rest of the series coming out every few days. So coming back to episode 51, my guest for today's episode is Adam Stone. At just 22 years of age, he's already built several successful businesses, has gone through the highly competitive 500 Startups Accelerator program, and was recently named in Forbes Asia 30 Under 30 for consumer technology. He is currently the founder and CEO of Speedlancer, which is the quickest way to get projects done with high-quality freelancers from around the world. In the episode, we chat about the basics of SEO, how to network effectively, bootstrapping versus fundraising, and how to build an effective distributed team. Without further ado, here is my interview with Adam Stone. Hi Adam, welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to be here today.
No, thanks for having me.
Just before you head off for 3 months as well.
Been a hectic week, but it's good to be here.
Absolutely, thanks for taking the time. So, for those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit of your story and what got you here today?
Sure. I mean, specifically to this building, I had to run. I took a couple of trains. No, but in terms of like entrepreneurship, I've always been an entrepreneur, I suppose. Started my first business when I was 12 years old. I was selling BB guns in the US, which is kind of like one of those barely legal things, but it was all under my dad's name, so kind of worked. And then we moved back to Australia when I was 14, wanted to start a new company. So I started a company in the telco space. We were doing mobile phone unlocking. So if your phone's with one network and you want to take it overseas, you could go through us. And that one, I suppose, was my first real company, because that one I scaled to, I think, over 120,000 paying customers around the world.
Wow. So
it's kind of one of those lucky like search engine optimization things, I just thought businesses, if you have a good product, people will come, but turns out I got pretty lucky with that one. And notably, I outsourced all of that to a 10-minute work week, so I was able to study full time. And then after it got to a 10-minute work week, I was still studying. I wanted to, start something new. So I started a side hustle at the time, which was Speedlancer. And Speedlancer at that time was just basically taking advantage of my 40 or so contacts in Skype, basically hooking my friends up with these freelancers on demand for 4-hour tasks. In December 2014, we'd done like $200 in revenue that month, and then to really nothing at all. And then 2 weeks later, I'd met Dave McClure from 500 Startups, got through the interview round, and then was in San Francisco 2 weeks later. And that's when Speedlancer became a real company, and 2 years later, I'm still here.
There's so much that I want to sort of get into in terms of your story in the episode. But I guess going back, one of the biggest things that I've kind of learned from going through the podcast is everyone's got a very different story when it comes to like their first sort of step into the startup space. Like I know for me, when I first started doing kind of like hustles in high school and stuff, I didn't really know what a startup was at that sort of time either.
Definitely.
Was that a conscious thing for you at that time? And did you know sort of early on as a 12-year-old, as a 14-year-old, what it was and what it was that you were sort of...
So I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. In fact, I had a researcher in, I think Brisbane, do some research on me as he's doing a PhD in student entrepreneurship, and he's found all of these trends. And one of the interesting things he's found, I actually read his... what do they call it? They published the thesis, right? So I actually read the thesis, and one of the interesting things he found was that, and common with me as well, was that student entrepreneurs didn't know that they were entrepreneurs until later in life when someone told them, oh, you're an entrepreneur. And then they often reject the fact that they're entrepreneurs, because when you start at that age, or it's just that innate to you, I mean, it's weird putting a label on it, I guess. And I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never thought of myself as that word of an entrepreneur. I just always did things that I guess made money, it's just self-sustaining ventures that had an impact. I never thought I was going to change the world or anything, I'd still be lucky to do that, but I always just did what I loved.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, it's funny that you meant like the same thing. I only found that out recently when I was on someone else's podcast.
Yeah.
And kind of diving in deeper into those sort of things. And I was like, like actually there were things that I did back in high school which can be considered sort of entrepreneurial. I just had I didn't call it that, and it wasn't money, or it wasn't like that sort of life-changing impact that I was going for. It was just something that
whatever you enjoyed, and it was entrepreneurial.
Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it?
So kind of, I guess, fast forward then to when you were 14 and launching this sort of telco company and coming back, moving to Australia and sort of starting something here. What was that like, and what was it sort of finding scaling to 120,000 paying users?
Yeah, so I sort of, as I mentioned before, took that really for granted. So talking about lessons between your first and second venture, like there were good lessons and bad ones. I got fortunate that my first business was successful. And what really worked for that business was just search engine optimization. And I'm not going to say I did that myself. I actually have a close friend, caught up with him last night, who used to work for a big e-commerce company in Australia, and he guided me in terms of SEO. He actually did their SEO. So the SEO on that site used the exact same format as that one, just all on-site sort of stuff, and then I implemented my own strategies like YouTube videos and that sort of thing. I mean, our YouTube videos have had 2 million views now. It's crazy. So it's just a good niche, high search volume, and they're making an SEO optimized site, which our competitors weren't doing. What we also did was we found a side niche. So we had what I realized was everyone would search for a free solution before they would ever pay. And then I came across this company called TrialPay out of the US, which has just sold to Visa last year. And what they do is they allow customers to complete advertising offers in exchange for their product. So Netflix, for example, will subsidize the unlock code. So everyone started coming to us for a free solution, but we still got paid. So yeah, I just got really lucky putting those two things together, and then had a good mentor or two that helped me. And I think mentors are the most crucial thing to success, I would say, because there's no way I could have discovered that stuff myself. There were some tactics I created, like the YouTube videos, and we used to do Yahoo Answers postings and all that stuff. But in terms of on-site SEO, that just was from a mentor.
Sure.
And then fast forwarding to Speedlancer, I sort of took for granted that traffic doesn't just come. You have to actually put in a lot of effort. And if your new site doesn't have as much search volume as my site did, then maybe you have to increase your price point. And that's sort of where we're going at today. We're going much more salesy route or marketing, and paying for customers rather than just organic viral growth, for better or worse. So that took me a bit of time to actually figure out that that's what the problem was, if you want to put it like that. Yeah.
Sure. And so, like, in terms of SEO, that's obviously something that a lot of people are, especially first-time founders, sort of think about a lot, don't really know where to get started. Do you have any sort of basic advice, tips, sort of guiding lights of how people can sort of get started in that space?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of advice. You can read it all online. What I would suggest ultimately is create a product, create a website, create an interface, create content that is all super valuable for your customers. And then SEO will come. So although we use YouTube videos in that company to get people to post videos of their unlocking and got those testimonials and then got them to link back, that was still actually super valuable for our customers. And that's sort of what brought views, and then the more views, the more highly it's ranked, and then the SEO benefits come. So I wouldn't say it's just like post crappy content and then optimize your site and then traffic will come. You actually have to do a lot of research, to the keywords.
Yep.
And keyword analysis is actually to help your customers as well, because it means you're generating content that your customers will want. Yeah, that's all it is.
Absolutely. And another thing as well that you kind of mentioned was the importance of mentors for you. And obviously, someone like Dave McClurg, who kind of, I guess, potentially opened the sort of door for you to come into 500 startups as well. I guess another sort of question that I see being asked really frequently is, how do I connect up or make those connections with the right sort of people? And what does it, how do I find the right people to either open doors or come on board as advisors or advise me? Do you have any sort of advice on what sort of worked for you?
Yeah, I got asked that exact question the other day. It's a bit of a weird one for me because I suppose I just love networking, if you call it networking. I mean, I call it just making connections and making
Yeah.
friends almost.
Yeah, just being sociable and
But
getting along with people.
Exactly, because I love what I do, so I do it anyway. If you have to force it, that's when it's sort of called networking, and that's when I'm like, oh, all right, we'll go to startup events and do all this stuff, which I do anyway. So I suppose, what do I do on a day or weekly basis? Startup events, I mentor others, anything which can help me build connections. I send emails, send LinkedIn requests, ask my friends or ask my mentors for connections to other people. Sometimes in rare cases where there's a CEO of a big company I want to meet, I'll actually go to an event just for them, or more commonly I will ask a friend for a connection to them, or just reach out to them on LinkedIn. And I have to say, sometimes I make up a reason to meet with them, even if I don't think it's useful now, just because I think it's really cool to meet with them. And then you have them in your network, you build a rapport with them, and you never know what will come 5-10 years later.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Networking is never a wasted game. It's a long game, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily the winning strategy either. Sometimes you just need to sit down and hustle. Like if I could turn my network into cash, I'd be fine. But sometimes monetizing your network is a harder thing. So sometimes monetizing first and then networking afterwards is more important. So it depends on what you find enjoyable, I would say.
Yeah, so it's almost about sort of creating those opportunities for you to like meet those people or be in front of them. No one's going to come to you out of the blue. And also, as you said, sort of adding value to people as well.
Exactly.
And being some sort of value.
The ultimate thing for me is when the mentor relationship does a full circle. So in a few years' time, when you actually start mentoring your mentor, that's when it becomes really cool.
That's pretty cool.
Because then you build a type rapport, and they become thankful that they've helped you, which becomes really strange. And that's sort of what is the most fulfilling thing to me, when you can pay it forward to the same people that helped you. It doesn't always help. It doesn't always work, because often you'll still be 10 steps behind of that person, but you begin to learn about their needs and try to help them out. And when you can do that, that's when you're actually doing it right, I would say.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's often overlooked with that is just the value creation needs to go both ways. So, and that doesn't need to mean that you're necessarily helping them, but if you're, providing them additional information or value, or, giving a different perspective on the industry, that's still valuable to people.
Exactly.
And a different perspective. And I don't think enough people consider that. It's all about, what can I get from this person being my advisor?
And if you think of most mentor relationships, they are very one way, and they're very long cycles.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentor some people, but most of them it is that two-way sort of scenario. But when it's one way, it feels really awkward, because eventually you lose track of, like, why am I helping this person sometimes, or why am I helping them so much? Which is great, it's fine, but not every mentor takes that in a good way. So you'll notice their responses slow down. So if you can, turn the relationship on its head. And also the other piece of advice I would give is have 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 different mentors, actually. Each who you can turn to for specific industry knowledge. So I have an SEO mentor, I have a fundraising mentor, I have a growth hacking mentor, I have a marketing mentor, all of these things, sales mentor. Literally, like I can name those people.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning. And I know exactly who I go to for each piece of advice. In addition to my friends and my employees and all that, and having that strong network means that everyone's super focused on what they can help you with and what you can help them with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we touched on your sort of experience with sort of meeting Dave and going through the 500 Startups program. And obviously they're coming down to Melbourne in the near future as well, which is really exciting. But what was your experience like, and what did you sort of get out of your experience in going through 500 Startups? Yeah,
I mean, I came in a bit dubious. I was like, well, I don't want to raise money. My last business I started with $50. Speedlancer I started with $400. I could have probably done it for less, looking back on it. I think most businesses you don't need a fundraise for at all. But anyway, I got this offer. I only knew about SEO as a marketing channel. I had already seen that Speedlancer wasn't accelerating as fast as I had hoped, like just organically. Maybe it was, I don't know, it just wasn't skyrocketing, but it was growing, kind of. I spoke to Dave, probably asked him one too many questions. He got a bit peeved at me, I think, because most people are begging him to join, and I was asking all these questions. But anyway, how are they valuable? I would say mostly in the fundraising. I did end up going the fundraising route, which I don't regret. Also, growth hacking, mentoring and guidance. They have a full-time growth hacker network within 500 startups, and you get to meet with them once a week, and they track your business. and then you can just tap them on the shoulder and ask them any questions you want. So this is like serious, like next level Silicon Valley growth hacking stuff, which some things I'd never heard of, and actually shaped, how our company is trajected now.
Yeah.
So that sort of network, the alumni network as well, and the brand cache. I mean, you'd be surprised how far that takes you. You can basically get any meeting you want just having the word 500 startups in your name.
Yeah, and so you touched on, your first business, or your first few businesses were entirely bootstrapped, and you went down the funding route with Speedlancer. What was your sort of experience on like the pros and cons of both?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your business. So I would say typically don't fundraise unless you can see unlimited growth potential in your company. And by unlimited, I mean multiple millions in ARR, annual recurring revenue that can expand across multiple verticals and multiple countries. If you can see that your business has that potential, I would say raise, because, why not? You're in it for the long haul. You don't care about the golden handcuffs. You're not in it for a salary. I'm not paying myself any salary at all with Speedlancer. I mean, I probably could start to, but, I just prefer not to because I want to give it the best shot I can at success. So that's why I've chosen not to bootstrap for Speedlancer. But that said, with my previous company was bigger than Speedlancer is now, and that was bootstrapped with $50. So I can see how a strong company doesn't need to bootstrap. However, I think if you have a strong company that doesn't need to bootstrap and you've got that unlimited growth potential, why not fundraise? You'll get terms that are just so attractive, especially in Silicon Valley, that it just makes sense to do it. And that's a personal decision everyone's got to make. But I would say, Australian founders tend to look away from fundraising and toward bootstrapping, which is totally fine. It might be smarter in aggregate, but I wouldn't totally discount fundraising just because you don't want to have investors.
Sure.
And my opinion might change in 5 years' time, but at least that's the way it's looking now, yeah.
Yeah, and again, you've kind of touched on this, but what was your experience in kind of looking at the investment sort of community in the US compared to what's sort of happening locally?
So when I got to 500 startups in 2015, I was there for 6 months. I actually had an investor offering us $500K right after the program, but my visa had been rejected. It was back to the US, so I couldn't go to take it. So it was a massive setback. I'm still grappling with a rejected visa now, so I can't even go to visit the US, which is a big pain. So I was forced to raise from Australia, but I was fortunate enough that we were able to raise at a US dollar valuation in US dollars in our US company, which is a subsidiary of our Aussie company. So there's a liquidity event at some stage. It will still nicely flow back to Australia, but nevertheless, we raise money from Australian investors. In some ways it's easier because there's less competition, and I think the fundraising climate is rapidly improving in Australia. Companies are realising that there's no harm done in trying in the US, and investors are realising that companies are going to the US to expand even, so they're investing in more lucrative valuations, taking riskier bets. Also, maybe our business was at a different stage than when I was trying to fundraise right after 500 startups. So last year we closed that round, and I noticed a massive change in the discussions we were having. So I think it is rapidly changing in Australia for the better.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention about there sort of being less competition here. I think one of the things that, and I've seen this a lot, especially again with first-time founders, is the expectation that just because they have an idea or that they're building a startup that they deserve dollars, versus if you're a good business, as you kind of mentioned, you have opportunities that are coming to you. And often, for the best opportunities, you have investors and VCs not fighting over each other, but they're actively looking to work for you. So I think it's a case of sort of focusing on what it is that you're building first versus trying to fundraise.
Totally. I mean, the later stage you are, the easier it is to raise. It's just then becomes a question of valuation, which is an easier discussion, I think, to have. Although I'm planning to write a blog post on why valuation shouldn't matter that much for fundraising, because ultimately the startup's either going to succeed or it's going to fail, and investors probably should be thinking about the success rate or the chance of success and what success will look like. Because if it's successful and it's going to be worth $1 billion, they don't care if they're investing at a $4 million valuation instead of a $1.5 or $2 million valuation.
Yeah, yeah. Looking forward to reading that blog.
I mean, I hate writing, so I have to churn that one out on the plane.
might have to put that through Speedlancer.
That's it.
So which is an interesting segue. So again, for those people that may not be as familiar, do you want to sort of give a short pitch about what Speedlancer is and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So with my previous venture, as I mentioned, I outsourced it all. So we had a team in the Philippines, and I sort of realised that not enough people were taking advantage of outsourcing in general. There's this huge stigma associated with it. You know, people don't trust the quality of talent, they don't trust the delivery times, and they don't know how the pricing works. They don't know how to stay on top of the people. They don't know how to negotiate with them. They don't understand the cultural differences. And to me, most of those things can actually be resolved with a bit of smarts and a bit of technology. And that's why I launched Speedlancer. So Speedlancer has 450 or 500 freelancers on our platform, all curated. So we've got designers, writers, researchers, and even developers now. Just as a bit of context, our writers have all written for sites like Inc. and The Guardian, Huffington Post, Wired, VentureBeat. We onboarded someone from Bloomberg the other week, published authors. Our designers are creative directors around the world. Researchers are all US based, and devs can be anywhere as well. Basically, wherever the best talent is, that's where we find it. We make them available on demand, and we put them through a heavy recruiting process, which I can go into later if you'd like. But basically, they're all available on demand. You can go into our website, pick a task or pick a bundle. Bundles are projects. Click on that, and within 5 to 60 minutes on average, someone starts working on it. I actually sent out a tweet about an hour and a half ago. Someone ordered a website design bundle, website design and development. As soon as they submitted their brief, someone picked up the first task, which was wireframing, in less than 60 seconds. Someone started working on it. So it's just faster than anything else out there. So yeah, that's what we do. Fixed prices, or you can also do custom projects where you suggest jobs that you want done, anywhere between $10 and $5,000, and you can pitch them to any one of our categories. Yeah. So fixed price, fast turnaround. So each task as an individual task, or within these bundles, which again are projects, they're all done within 4-hour turnaround. So that the aim of that is to cut procrastination out, cut the regular working day in half, and just make sure that work gets done when it should be done. Make sure that when you hire a freelancer, as soon as they click accept, they're working hard on your project exclusively.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, obviously one of the biggest kind of drawbacks in people's mind about outsourcing is the quality of work, especially when it comes to development. There's no shortage of horror stories of people going out and
I've had my whole site get stolen before.
Oh wow.
And sold to a competitor.
Jeez.
I was doing my unlocking website. So yeah, I've been through everything. I've spent $100K on Upwork actually. So I've certainly got some stories.
Wow. So I guess from some of your stories, and obviously what you're sort of doing with Speedlancer now, what are some of the things that people can do to ensure that they have or I guess minimize the risk of things not working out, but what are some of the things that they can do to ensure that that everything sort of falls in place?
So the briefing is always the hardest thing. That's not something that we've 100% perfected yet, because ultimately the output depends on the brief that the customer provides. But that said, we expect that. So it's all about communication, and we give you live chat with your freelancer directly through the platform, which means that you can go through revisions. There's a free round of revisions with every single task through our platform. So we try to resolve some of that. But yeah, mainly it's the brief. So in terms of how I outsourced my previous business to a 10-minute work week, I actually wrote a blog post on that one of 2 blog posts I've ever written. It's a good one though, in my opinion. Basically, I talk about how you should create a process out of everything that you do, and how in-depth that process needs to be, and how you should start off with doing everything yourself first, writing that process out, getting a freelancer to do it, talking to them, adding into that process any questions that they have, and then getting them to work on it and adding to that process as they go. And by then you can expand that process from 1 person to 10 to 100 without even lifting a finger yourself. And that's sort of where the premise for Speedlancer came from as well, with some of our bundles, like our content marketing one, for example, where we do a content calendar, research, and then writing, and then design. That's actually a process that we'd done ourselves and realised, okay, we can actually make a process and sell it to our customers as a bundle. So it sort of all fits into one premise in what I think is the best way of outsourcing, where you put one person on their unique skill set, tell them exactly the steps to do, and then it's almost like a machine, but where they're actually very talented in the steps that they're doing. So in our case, our writers are top journalists. We just tell them exactly what they need to do. And that also drives down the cost, improves the time, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that you sort of touched on there of like doing the things yourself first is something that I'm a really big advocate of, because I think it's very hard to like hire or bring in people. If you haven't done the task yourself, you don't know what it is you're looking for.
I'm learning that more and more and more. You know, as we're expanding sales and all that. Every time I've refused to do something myself, it never works. So you've got to put in the hard yards. But that said, I'd prefer to put in the hard yards to help someone else do the hard yards from there. Yeah. So it's more of an investment, right? It's like buying a property and then you get this recurring income, this perpetual income. It's like you put in that same amount of work, rather than, I guess the equivalent is renting. So you put in that big upfront capital, human capital in this case, and then from then on you get this perpetual benefit of the process just doing itself.
Absolutely. And so, you know, again, you're essentially building a marketplace of people, and you mentioned that, you know, some of the writers and the people that you have working on are close to the top of their fields, if not top of the fields. What was that sort of initial phase for you in building out Speedlancer like in terms of attracting and bringing these sort of things on that side of the market?
That's a really good question. I thought the freelancer side would be impossible. I remember talking to some mentors and being like, hey, do you have any, like, give me all your freelancers that you use in your network, and I was just hustling hard to get them. Then I realized, you know, why don't we just, you know, invite freelancers to our platform based on portfolio sites. So, you know, finding people with top portfolios and online ratings and getting them to apply to us. And then we go through a whole recruiting process. And we've got, I think we've interviewed over 1,500 people, maybe even 2,000. We've got 450 on the platform. And just with that number of applicants, or that amount of applicants, we actually have a huge selection pool to choose from. I never thought we'd be getting this sort of quality of talent. When I launched it, it was more like a Fiverr competitor. And every time we've increased our price point and therefore increased the talent available, our sales have just shot up.
Yeah.
So the higher quality we go, the more customers we have, the better clients we have, and the more impactful work we can do, which is really exciting for me because I never thought I'd be working with these sorts of people.
Yeah. Was that a conscious decision then to like move away from sort of competing with the Fiverr, where it's more about sort of price comparison versus you know, moving more towards the higher end sort of quality scale?
Yeah, to me it wasn't so much about quality as it was about attracting the customers.
Right.
I want to make this thing scalable and big, so whatever had the biggest market for me would mean it was the biggest impact. So if people wanted a Fiverr type product, that's what we would have happily given them. Turns out more customers, more people we're speaking to wanted high quality talent, so that's what we've shifted to. And the system still works. Freelancers still love us. We have had freelancers with us for a couple of years, and you know we just onboard new talent every day. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Sure. So I guess once you've got that side of the market figured out, what was it like getting and building traction on the other side?
I mean, that's a day-to-day challenge. With any marketplace, or at least talent marketplace, or even agencies, anyone in the space would be lying to you if they said they had too many clients. Which is not true. So we're fortunate enough that our supply side and our delivery is super scalable. We've had 1,000 customers to date, but I'm pretty sure we could easily accommodate 50,000 with our current, you know, platform and that sort of thing, or even 100,000. So just finding that sort of customer base is the day-to-day challenge, and how we've done that in the beginning was mainly just hustling. So 500 Startups was a great one because, you know, the alumni network was useful in itself. I didn't want to make it a business that suited my network, but that's what it sort of originally turned out to be. And that's why we moved to a higher price point. It's still not that expensive, it's pretty reasonable. But with that higher price point came a different sales strategy, and that's sort of where we're at now, yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously you kind of touched on the importance of like sort of growth hacking and SEO a little bit earlier in the talk as well, but from the sounds of it, the first kind of traction point on both sides were like literally just hustling and sort of going out and doing almost the unscalable first. Was that a really important sort of first step for you?
Probably looking back on it, it was. I mean, no one would prefer to have to hustle.
Yeah.
So if you had that organic sort of growth, then that's always better. Airbnb took 6 years though to get to that sort of traction point, and then they somehow took off. So I think, you know, in some ways that's bound to happen, but it depends on how good your product is.
Yeah.
So Will Schroeder is one of my mentors or advisors. He's a startups.co Clarity FM. He always says to me, like, you know, these things take time, especially during 500 startups. He could see how hard I was hustling and wanted it to grow. And one of the things he said to me was, you know, to get to $1 million business, you need to be a 6-figure business first. Literally, like, you have to, at one point or another, you're going to go through that phase.
Yeah.
So there's literally no way of going from 0 to $1 million without passing through every stage in the middle. And it's just how long that takes you. And as long as you're building off what customers are telling you, preferably getting to break-even point or profitability, then it really doesn't matter what stage you get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like, I mean, one of the things that I've kind of found from running my own startups and working with other businesses as well is almost like doing the unscalable first and doing the hustling helps you at least understand the right sort of messaging and gives you all of those information points up front, because at the start you've got so many variables of like, why is or isn't this sort of working, that it's hard to kind of figure out what is the right sort of step for that.
Yeah, I generally agree that do the unscalable, especially if you can use that to your advantage in order to create those processes.
Yeah.
And get those processes to be scalable, even if they're supposedly inherently unscalable. Like, I got customer service to be a scalable process in my previous company, like technical support. We had to support over 100,000 customers, but we got that in itself to be a scalable process. So if you can, I think if you put in enough effort into the processes, then you can make unscalable things scalable, and at least you know the unscalable thing is working. So what's wrong with that?
Absolutely. So, I mean, speaking of like putting in sort of structures and processes in place, you know, one of the hardest things as you're sort of growing as a team is just managing everyone that's kind of there. And so you're heading away for 3 months, and you know, some of the things that you've done previously is having a distributed network of your staff everywhere. Are there any particular things that you do to help put in those structures or put in those processes to help manage the team and the business?
I think going away just forces everyone to sort of build a structure urgently. No, I'm kidding, but this is a new one for us, to be honest, but I think it's good because it means we can instantly be global from day one if I'm traveling and working full time, just in a new location. We're fortunate enough that we've been a distributed team from day one. So Bangladesh, which is about to become US, is moving to the US, I think Wednesday next week or Tuesday next week, which is cool. Brazil for devs, Philippines for my previous company, and then Sydney for John, he's our marketing guy, and 2 of us in Melbourne. So we're pretty distributed, which will enable us, it does enable us to basically move wherever we need to move. In terms of like processes and structures, I'm about to figure most of that out. I guess figure it out again, but Slack is a really good one. So that's been a huge improvement over just using email like I had to do before. With email, I had to be a bit more siloed, so I'd train one guy, the head of customer support, and I wouldn't even really chat to the others. He would just train all of them because he was in a similar location. That's how I got around it then. But with Slack, you can actually see all the communication in individual teams, which is pretty useful. So I'd say Slack is good, and just building these processes and then taking advantage of different time zones if you can.
Yeah.
So spread your resources across.
Is there anything, so I mean, building a team that's distributed from day one, is there anything that you do in particular in terms of your, I guess, the structure of your day or your week to ensure that you have those sort of regular touch points, or is that, again, something that's kind of built ad hoc? I
mean, that's the other thing as well that I forgot to touch on. I basically work any time of day I need to, so I chat with my devs in Brazil at 11 p.m, and then I'm up, 8 a.m. talking to John on Slack or whatever it is. So it can get a little bit hectic, but it suits my lifestyle at this stage of my life. I'm only 22, so I can stay up late, wake up early. It's not too much of an issue. I can take a nap in the middle of the day if I really need to. But yeah, you do. That's a good point. You do have to be a bit more flexible in terms of time zones. But that said, you can get other people to be more flexible sometimes as well. Just requires that sort of mutual understanding.
Yeah. So on that, like, is there anything that you look for in particular then when you're sort of building that team out? Does that sort of hiring process look any different for you than it would be if you were hiring a team locally?
I've never hired a local team. So funnily enough, Dean, who works with us, he just replaced Lara. She was a backpacker, so she's gone to Uluru this week, but she was with us for 2 months for sales, and then Dean's just replaced her. He's in Melbourne. He was the first one, or she was the first one I ever hired in-house. In Melbourne. So, not in-house, John's in-house as well. They're all in-house, but offshore, some of them. But yeah, so Dean was the first one I hired that was sitting next to me. That was really awkward at first. Yeah, it took some adjusting for me to get used to sitting next to someone and having to like talk to them. Yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of friends. It's not like I don't like people, but it's just a different work ethic, I suppose you can put it, or different ways of working when you've got someone sitting next to you versus online.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that adjustment goes both ways as well. So if you're used to someone sitting next to you and they're suddenly on the other side of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In some ways I prefer working, everyone works by themselves. So John came to Sydney last week. We usually see each other once every quarter. And we basically came up with a marketing plan. So that's really good for face-to-face. It's much harder over Skype with all the stuttering or something. Someone's got to fix that problem still. But yeah, so we had him in Melbourne, and when he's back in Sydney, we do weekly touch points, and I don't really hassle him during the week because he knows exactly what he needs to do, and yeah, I know he's capable of doing it.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to train people in strategy if you've got someone sitting next to you, but the actual doing, I don't think anybody actually wants to be sitting next to anyone else.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Cool. So what's next for Speedlancer?
So, just growing the customer base, I suppose. Making sure that we're the most valuable tool or resource we can be for our clients, and getting bigger and bigger clients to trust us. We're ultimately in the trust business. I think in terms of, making sure people have the most value out of us, in some ways that's by getting them onto like a recurring kind of model, because the more they use us, the more they like us, the more they get out of us. And also works for us because we can support them a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the direction we're heading.
It's interesting that you mentioned trust when you're sort of talking about your distributed team. It's almost like you're building that internal culture of trust as well, where you don't have someone that's watching over your shoulder and you're trusting them to.
That's actually a great point as well, yeah. That is a good point, because I suppose I took for granted that people can't just trust people when they're not sitting next to them.
Yeah.
And that's something, we always encounter in the freelancing, or if you want to call it outsourcing space. People have that stigma. And I didn't realise that. I'd heard of it, but I thought people were stupid for not outsourcing. But it's something that certainly everyone feels some sort of stigma about. So that's something that we always have to get around. And we will get over it. Even in the last couple of years, companies, agencies are realising that FTEs aren't the best way to scale. And that's where a company like ours can really excel.
Absolutely. Yeah, really excited to hear your journey from here on forward. But for anyone that wants to get in touch with you, find out more about Speedlancer, just say hello. What's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, anyone can email me anytime. I'm at adam@speedlancer.com. Visit our website, obviously, or on Twitter @stoneadam. You can also find my Medium for when I do end up vlogging, maybe sometime eventually. But yeah, so email me anytime.
Well, it's on the record now, so your blog has to come out at some point.
But sitting on the plane to Israel and then Berlin, and I'll be working on that.
I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. Adam, thanks so much for taking the time today to be on the show, and hope you have a great trip.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Cool.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to episode 51 of the Startup Playbook podcast. You can find the show notes of my interview with Adam, along with a curated list of tools and resources for startup founders at startupplaybook.co. As always, you can join the conversation through our Twitter account. The handle is @PlaybookStartup. Next week, I'll be publishing my live interview with Don Peppers. Don is an American marketing futurist, best-selling business author, keynote speaker, and one of the world's authoritative experts on customer experience. He has spoken on customer experience in more than 60 countries on 6 continents, and his books have been translated into 18 different languages. He was inducted into the Direct Marketing Association Hall of Fame along with Seth Godin and Martha Rogers, and in 2015, Satmetrics ranked him as the world's most authoritative expert on customer experience. The Times of London has listed Peppers among their top 50 business brains, and Accenture has included him in its global list of the top 50 business intellectuals. A big thank you to the awesome team at the York Butter Factory for setting up the interview with Don. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at episode 52 next week.